The office doors didn't open, the badges went dead, and $2,500,000 was on the line, and that was the exact morning James, our CEO, looked me in the eye and said, "You're replaceable." But rewind a few days. Back to the moment he first humiliated me. The conference room was already tense before I opened my laptop. The overhead lights flickered like they were in on the joke. I walked everyone through the new access scheduling dashboard, clean, precise, foolproof. I'd built it, tested it, lived inside it for months. Halfway through, James leaned back in his chair, stretched like a bored professor, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Ashley, let's not oversell this. It's clerical support at best." The room froze. Then came the nervous chuckles. Sarah, our VP of operations, didn't bother hiding her smirk. I kept my voice steady. The system prevented 3 investor delays last quarter. That's over $300,000 in preserved revenue. James waved his hand like he was brushing away crumbs. Any intern with Google skills could have done this. Don't mistake busy work for innovation. It wasn't what he said, it was how easily he dismissed me, like months of my work meant less than the stale coffee cooling in front of him. When the meeting ended, Sarah leaned close as she walked past and whispered, "Told you not to overplay your hand." Then she tapped my arm like I was a kid at her first summer job. Replaceable. Forgettable. That's how they saw me. And that's why they never saw what was coming. Friday afternoon, HR called me in. The hallway buzzed with fake productivity, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. I carried nothing, because I already knew what this was. Inside, Michael from HR sat at the beige table with a binder open like he was about to read me my last rites. James stood in the corner, arms crossed, acting like this was a minor formality before his golf weekend. Michael cleared his throat. "Ashley, due to restructuring and cost optimization, your role is being eliminated. Today will be your last day." "Cost optimization," I repeated. My voice was flat. Controlled. James didn't even blink. "It's nothing personal. We need lean operations. Anyone can run that system you built." That line almost made me laugh. "Anyone? Sure. Let's see them try." Michael slid an envelope across the table. 2 weeks severance. Standard NDA. A generic pen with the company logo tossed on top, like that would sweeten the insult. I didn't touch it. Instead, I looked James dead in the eyes. "You're right. Anyone could do my work. Let's see if they do." For the first time, his expression flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. I left HR with a cardboard box of my things, the cheap fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like insects. Sarah stood at her office door, arms crossed, smiling like she'd won. In the elevator, I balanced the box against my hip and whispered to myself, "Replaceable? We'll test that theory." The walk back to my desk felt like a spotlight was on me. Everyone pretended to be busy, but the silence was loud enough to cut glass. Keyboards clattered too evenly, conversations died mid-sentence, and not a single pair of eyes looked directly at me. That told me everything. They were watching, just not openly. I gripped the cardboard box tighter under my arm as I moved down the row of cubicles. The hum of the old fluorescent lights buzzed above my head, steady, relentless. It always sounded like a swarm of insects. Normally, I drowned it out. Today it drilled into my skull with every step I took. At my desk, I sat down in the squeaky chair that had carried me through too many late nights. I pulled open the bottom drawer and slid out a second, smaller box I'd always kept hidden there. My just-in-case box. A joke I'd made with myself the first year I worked here, back when I thought layoffs happened to other people. Inside was a framed photo of me and my sister, a plant that hadn't been watered in weeks, and a bundle of sticky notes with little codes and reminders. The plant drooped over the edge like it had given up long before I did. I started packing, slow and deliberate. Every item I touched was a reminder of hours I'd poured into this place. The half-empty coffee mug from a client's holiday gift basket. A stack of notebooks with every page full of timelines, diagrams, and half-scribbled ideas. A keychain I'd won during some pointless team-building exercise. Behind me, I felt eyes. Not everyone bothered hiding it. 2 analysts from IT peeked over their monitors, whispering. One of the junior associates walked by, slowed her pace just enough to get a good look at me, then sped up when I caught her. Then Brian from facilities appeared at the corner of my cubicle. He was awkward on a good day, and now he looked like he'd wandered into a crime scene. Hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched, eyes not sure where to land. "Sorry, Ashley," he said. Didn't see this coming. I set down the photo frame and looked up at him. Neither did they. The words left my mouth steady, flat. But the way his brow furrowed told me he heard the edge in my tone. He opened his mouth like he wanted to ask what I meant, then thought better of it. He shuffled away, scratching the back of his neck, leaving me to my silence. I slid the last notebook into the box when I heard heels clicking on the polished floor. Sarah. Of course. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she wanted an audience. She held her coffee cup like it was a champagne glass, a smile playing across her lips. Don't forget the plant, she said, sing-song, stopping at my desk just long enough for everyone around to hear. I looked up at her. She expected anger. She expected tears. What she got was nothing. I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't speak. Just silence. The kind that makes people squirm. Her smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before she walked on, heels clicking like gunshots down the aisle. I closed the box, taped it shut with the spare strip I kept in the drawer, and stood. The weight of the cardboard pressed into my hip as I carried it toward the elevator. Each step echoed. Colleagues whispered. Some even smiled behind their hands, like my downfall was entertainment. Good. Let them laugh. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them certain this was the end. I pressed the elevator button, the metal panel cold under my finger. The door slid open with a mechanical groan, and I stepped inside. For a moment, I faced the office one last time. Rows of glowing monitors, the buzz of the fluorescents, Sarah's laughter drifting faintly from the break room. The doors closed, sealing me off. I exhaled, slow and calm. And for the first time all week, I let a smile curve across my face. They thought this was my last walk. But it was only the first step. I slammed the apartment door and dropped the cardboard box on the table. The silence hit harder than the firing. No buzzing lights, no fake chatter, no phones ringing. Just me and four walls. I opened my laptop. First stop, email. No deactivation notice. Just spam from the company calendar and an automated good luck from payroll. Then I typed the admin portal address. It loaded instantly. Full access. Every badge. Every meeting room. Every visitor pass. All still under my name. My pulse didn't race, it steadied. I clicked the license tab. Billing contact, Ashley. Admin of record, Ashley. Transfer requires admin approval. The words sat on the screen like a weapon no one else realized I had. Next came the logs. Approvals. Timestamps. Every single one mine. Their signatures? Absent. Not sabotage. Not hacking. Just their own rules, left untouched because nobody bothered to read them. From the drawer, I pulled an old contract binder. Blue sticky note still stuck to the corner, the one I'd left for myself months ago. Admin handoff must be notarized. I almost laughed. They had no idea their own policy was about to choke them. Then I checked the renewal token. Monthly validation. Next expiration, Sunday, 11:59 p.m. No confirmation from the admin, and the system automatically shifts to safe mode. Safe mode means badge sync locked, meeting rooms frozen, visitor passes invalid. Not by my hand, by the system's design. I opened a fresh document and labeled it Handoff Checklist. Steps were simple. ID verification, indemnity form, transfer fee invoice, confirmation call. Clean. Professional. Unavoidable. Email drafted. Short, neutral, no edge. Per policy, admin transfer requires the attached packet. Please schedule notarization before Sunday 11:59 p.m. to avoid disruption. I CC'd HR. I CC'd legal. I even CC'd the board's generic inbox, the one they ignore until it's too late. Then I hit send. Screenshots followed. Portal, contract clauses, email headers, timestamps. Saved them all into a folder labeled receipts. Backed them up to a USB drive and tossed it into my bag. Brian from facilities replied 5 minutes later. Thanks, Ashley. We'll review Monday. Perfect. Monday. Too late. I leaned back in my chair. James's voice echoed in my head. Anyone can run it. I smiled at the screen. Let's see if anyone even tries. Saturday morning, I woke earlier than usual. No alarm, no plan, just the sharp edge of focus that comes when anger cools into calculation. I brewed coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled the laptop close. The system dashboard was still open from last night. I stared at the countdown clock, 34 hours left until expiration. That number pulsed like a heartbeat at the corner of the screen. They thought they fired me on Friday, and by Monday I'd be irrelevant. The irony made me laugh into my coffee. I clicked through the investor calendar. Guest passes were queued for Monday at 8:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the $2.5 million demo. All tied directly to my admin approvals. Without confirmation, every badge would blink red at the scanner. Every door would stay locked. Every meeting room frozen in pending status. It wasn't sabotage. It was policy. They built the rules. I just lived by them longer than anyone else. I leaned back and pictured James. His dismissive smirk. Anyone can run it. Sure. Anyone who knows where the switches live, where the logs hide, and how the system breathes when no one's watching. Anyone who cared enough to stitch it together while the executives were out at long lunches. I opened my inbox. HR's auto-reply was still bouncing back. Facilities had gone dark. Legal hadn't even acknowledged the packet. Every non-response was another nail in the coffin they built for themselves. By noon, I printed everything: emails, contracts, screenshots, and slid them into a black folder. The folder went straight into my bag, heavy and certain. This wasn't a plan anymore. It was evidence. That night, I sat by the window, city lights blinking against the glass, and whispered to myself, tomorrow they'll learn what replaceable really looks like. Sunday morning arrived like a held breath. The city outside was quiet, too quiet for my nerves, but inside my apartment the air buzzed with the weight of everything I'd uncovered. The laptop sat open on the table, the black folder of printed evidence beside it, and the ticking digital clock at the top of my admin console reminded me, 20 hours until lockout. I pulled the binder closer, the one marked Vendor Agreements, Security Services. The pages were stiff, the corners bent from being dragged across too many conference tables. I flipped until I found the section I remembered. Clause 14. 4. Highlighted in pale yellow from the day I'd first read it. All transfers of administrative rights must be executed by the current administrator of record in the presence of a notary, with indemnity release signed by the successor party. I ran my finger across the sentence. Clean. Unambiguous. Ironclad. James had signed this contract himself 2 years ago, a rushed deal after a board member complained about compliance gaps. I remembered the day vividly. He was late to the meeting, scrawled his initials without reading, and barked at me to file the boring stuff. That boring stuff had just turned into my shield. I spread the pages across the table and started matching details. My name on the admin line. My email in the vendor registry. The timestamp from when I was promoted to coordinator and given temporary oversight that somehow never got updated. Their negligence, my leverage. I drafted a note for myself on a legal pad. No admin transfer equals no legal access. No access equals no demo. No demo equals breach of investor contract. The chain of cause and effect was brutally simple. By mid-morning, I walked to the local coffee shop. The clerk looked half asleep until I slid the binder onto the counter. I asked for high-resolution scans, certified copies on heavy stock. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. By the time I left, I had a neat stack in a manila envelope, a tangible reminder that this wasn't theory anymore. It was law, paper, ink, and signatures. Back home, I added the copies to the black folder, now thicker, heavier. I laid it flat and stared at it like it was a weapon. Because it was. My phone buzzed around too. An email notification. For a moment, my stomach tightened, expecting panic from the company. But it was just Michael from HR, short. Cold. Corporate. Please refrain from contacting staff further. Your departure was final. I laughed. The arrogance. They thought the problem was me sending emails, not the ticking time bomb in their own system. I hit archive without replying. They would understand soon enough. At 4, I brewed another coffee and opened the system logs again. Guest passes for Monday morning were queued, waiting for my confirmation. No one had touched them. The approval still sat under my name like unclaimed luggage. I thought about Sarah. She'd be the one orchestrating Monday's investor visit, rehearsing her lines, practicing her fake laugh, ready to bask in the spotlight. She'd be smiling right up until the moment the first badge turned red. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. As night fell, I sat by the window with the folder on the table beside me. Streetlights flickered on, cars hissed through the wet pavement, and the city carried on oblivious. Inside, I counted the hours. At 11 p.m., I checked the token again. 21 hours left. By this time tomorrow, the system would be in safe mode. Doors locked. Rooms frozen. Visitors stranded in the lobby. $2.5 million on the line. I closed the binder, slid the folder into my bag, and whispered into the dark apartment. Tomorrow, James will learn what his signature is worth. I woke up before sunrise, the sky still a flat sheet of gray over the city. The clock on my nightstand glowed 5:12 a.m. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out, my mind circling the same loop. Emails, contracts, timestamps. The countdown had slipped into single digits. Less than 18 hours until the system shifted into safe mode. I brewed strong coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. The black folder was there waiting, thick with proof, heavy with leverage. But raw documents weren't enough. If this turned into a fight, I needed more than contracts, I needed a trail. Something no one could dismiss as Ashley's word against the company's. So I started pulling breadcrumbs. First, the emails. I exported every single one tied to access management, approvals, notices, meeting confirmations. Hundreds of them. Each stamped with my account, each marked as admin executed. I bundled them into a clean archive, zipped, labeled, and duplicated onto 2 separate USB drives. Next, the vendor tickets. I logged into the support portal, and there they were, years of service requests, every single one routed through me. Password resets, emergency overrides, holiday schedules. My name stamped on all of them. I screenshotted the summaries, then downloaded the PDFs of closed cases. If the company tried to argue I was a minor cog, the evidence would scream otherwise. Then the logs. I pulled badge activity, room reservations, and visitor approvals from the past 3 months. Thousands of entries. I filtered them, highlighted the ones tied to investor visits, and circled my name again and again. No one else had touched them. Sarah's name was nowhere. James's? Forget it. They had let me build the system, let me maintain it, and never bothered to understand it. By 9, my table looked like a war room. Papers stacked in neat piles, USB drives lined up like bullets, sticky notes flagging the most damning lines. I didn't need to invent a story. The story was already there. I just had to package it. I created a master folder on my desktop labeled receipts_final. Inside, I divided everything: contracts, emails, logs, tickets. Clean, organized, undeniable. The kind of package a lawyer loves and a CEO fears. I sat back and looked at the clock. 17 hours left. The phone buzzed. Another email. This one from Sarah, short and clipped. Ashley, please confirm if you still have admin access. Facilities is reporting delays. Let me know ASAP. I smiled. She had no idea she was giving me proof in real time. I screenshotted the message, dropped it straight into the folder, and didn't reply. Silence would tell the story better than any words. At noon, I took a walk to clear my head. The air was sharp, the streets quiet. I ducked into a cafe, ordered another coffee, and opened my laptop at the corner table. Around me, people tapped on keyboards oblivious. They were working on emails and presentations. I was working on leverage worth millions. I drafted one more note. Simple, professional. Per policy, I remain administrator of record until notarized transfer. Please see attached documents. I didn't send it yet. Timing mattered. Sent too early, they'd scramble. Sent too late, I'd look reckless. It needed to land like a hammer right when the damage became undeniable. By the time I returned home, the sun was setting. 16 hours left. I checked the system once more. No changes. No transfers filed. No notarization. Nothing but silence from HR and legal. I sat back in the chair, folder at my side, and whispered to myself, they think they're ignoring me. But really, they're ignoring the fuse. And tomorrow morning, the spark would hit. Sunday evening, the city glowed with the restless hum of office towers still burning electricity for no reason. I chose a cafe on the corner, the kind that stayed open late and smelled of burnt espresso and old wood. I slid into the back booth, laptop on the table, folder beside me, and ordered a coffee that tasted like battery acid but kept my hands warm. The cafe was loud enough to blur into white noise, students tapping keyboards, 2 guys arguing about stocks, a couple whispering too sharply to stay private. It was the perfect cover. No one looked twice at a woman with a laptop and a stack of papers. I opened the admin console. 15 hours left. The number in the corner of the screen ticked down like a heartbeat. I checked the queue for Monday again. Guest passes still pending, investor meeting set for 9 sharp, visitor approvals untouched. Then I open my draft email and reread it. Clean. Professional. Polite. Per policy, I remain administrator of record until notarized transfer. Please see attached documents. No threats. No dramatics. Just a mirror held up to their negligence. Timing was the key. If I sent it now, they'd scramble all night and maybe claw their way out. If I waited until the lockout hit, it would look like retaliation. The sweet spot was somewhere in the middle, when the doors froze and the panic was public. I closed the email without sending. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out the binder. Clause 14. For stared back at me like scripture. No notarization, no transfer. No transfer, no access. James's own signature at the bottom. I traced it with my finger and imagined his face when this clause landed back on his desk. I opened the folder of evidence. Every screenshot, every ticket, every log. I knew the story by heart now. The company let one person hold the keys, mocked her for doing it, then shoved her out the door without bothering to read their own contracts. They thought they fired me. In reality, they'd fired their only line of defense. A group of students laughed too loudly behind me, snapping me out of the thought. I sipped the bitter coffee and let the noise fade. Focus. On the screen, I drafted a short timeline. Friday, termination. Saturday, system still active. Sunday, no transfer. Monday, investor demo blocked. For steps. For nails in the coffin. It wasn't sabotage, it was gravity. All I had to do was stop holding the rope. By 8, the cafe had thinned out. The barista was wiping tables, glancing at me like he was waiting for me to leave. I packed up, slid the folder into my bag, and walked out into the cool night air. The city streets felt sharper, brighter. Streetlights blinked like warning signals. 15 hours left until the fuse burned down. I tightened my coat around me, whispered into the empty street, let them call me replaceable tomorrow. And then I smiled. The clock hit midnight. 14 hours left. I sat in the apartment with nothing but the glow of my laptop and the steady pulse of the admin console counting down towards safe mode. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional car outside. I didn't need more coffee. Adrenaline was enough. I went through the system one last time. Every pass for the Monday demo still marked pending approval. Dozens of guest IDs waiting to be activated. All tied to my name. Without confirmation, the system would drop them. No access. No doors. No rooms. I opened my inbox. No response from legal. No response from HR. The only reply all weekend had been Brian from facilities. We'll review Monday. They weren't reviewing anything. They were sleepwalking into a wall. I printed the checklist again: ID verification, indemnity form, transfer fee. I underlined each item with a black pen. Then I slid the copy into my folder with the contracts. If they tried to twist the story later, I wanted to show I'd been clear from the start. By 2 a.m., I shut the laptop and leaned back. I thought of James telling me I was replaceable. I thought of Sarah smirking as I carried the box past her office. They believed power lived in titles, in the corner office with glass walls. But real power had always lived in the lines of code, the contracts no one bothered to read, the logs no one else knew how to pull. Invisible work. My work. 7 hours until the investor team arrived at the building. 8 until the demo. The timing was brutal, perfect. I walked to the window, the city still half asleep. Streetlights buzzed, neon signs blinked. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. I whispered to the glass, "Tomorrow morning, you'll understand exactly how replaceable I am." Then I set the folder by the door, ready to grab on my way out. No more planning. No more waiting. Just a countdown. And every second, the fuse burned shorter. The parking garage was cold, concrete echoing with every drip from the ceiling pipes. I parked 3 levels down, far enough that no one would notice me, close enough that I could see the glass lobby across the street. The investor team was scheduled for 9. It was 7:45. I sipped coffee from a paper cup and watched the building breathe. Lights flicked on floor by floor. Employees rushed in with phones to their ears, swiping badges at the turnstiles. Green lights blinked. For now. I checked the admin console on my laptop. The timer glowed, 1 hour and 14 minutes left. The passes for the investors were still pending. No approvals. No changes. Just waiting to die. At 8:10, the first signs of strain appeared. A junior analyst tried his badge twice, frowned, then called someone. A manager came down with her own badge, same result. Both locked out. I took a screenshot from my console. Access attempt, denied, timestamp exact. Evidence. By 8:25, the lobby started to clog. People lined up at the security desk, waving their badges, arguing with the guard. The system wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what the contract said it should do without an admin of record. I spotted Sarah pacing near the glass doors, her phone pressed to her ear, her smile stretched thin. She kept glancing toward the entrance like she could will it open. No chance. At 8:32, a black sedan pulled up. Investor car. Four people stepped out, crisp suits, briefcases, ready for the $1 million demo. Jennifer, the lead, checked her phone, then walked straight to the scanner. She pressed her pass, confident. Red light. She tried again. Red. Her head tilted, eyes narrowing. She looked at Sarah through the glass. Sarah laughed nervously, motioned for patience, then turned her back and barked into her phone. I snapped another screenshot. Investor badge attempt. Denied. Timestamp. Proof. By 8:45, the lobby looked like a riot waiting to happen. Dozens of employees trapped outside, executives rushing down to handle it, James nowhere in sight. The investors stood apart, arms crossed, unimpressed. Every minute was money bleeding out. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to see more. The system was running the show now. All I had to do was watch them scramble. I leaned back in the car seat, let out a slow breath, and whispered to myself, "Welcome to Monday." By 9 o'clock, the building had turned into a pressure cooker. The lobby was jammed with employees clutching their coffee cups like lifelines, swiping badges again and again, each time met with the same red flash. Security guards waved their hands helplessly, repeating the only phrase they had, "Systems down." Upstairs, the executives scrambled. From my car across the street, I could see silhouettes moving behind the glass walls of the conference floor. Sarah's figure was unmistakable, sharp blazer, sharper panic. She paced like a caged animal, phone glued to her ear. At 9:05, the investor team was still in the lobby, arms crossed, their patience thinning. Jennifer, the lead, tapped her watch and whispered something to the man beside her. He shook his head. Every tick of that watch was money evaporating. Inside my laptop, the logs told the story. Access attempts spiking every second. Hundreds of denials stacking into a neat, undeniable timeline. Each one tagged, no admin confirmation. Each one traceable back to the failure to transfer rights. I saved the file twice, smiling as the evidence built itself. At 9:12, James finally appeared in the lobby. He swept in like he owned the place, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. He shook Jennifer's hand, overcompensating with his booming voice, promising it was just a technical hiccup. She didn't buy it. Her expression was stone. Sarah rushed to meet him, whispering frantically. James barked at the guards, then pointed at the ceiling as if IT lived in the ducts and could fix this by magic. The guards shrugged. The system didn't care who was shouting. It was locked, blind, obedient only to policy. By 9:20, the demo was officially late. I imagined the boardroom upstairs, investors staring at empty screens, the polished presentation deck waiting for a projector that couldn't even be turned on. Every second was another crack in the facade James had built around his lean operations. I opened the email draft I'd saved. My finger hovered over send. Not yet. Let them cook a little longer. Let the panic sink teeth into their polished confidence. At 9:27, Jennifer finally spoke loud enough for the lobby to hear. If you can't run your own building, how can you run our account? The words hit like a gunshot. Phones came out instantly. Employees texted, tweeted, posted. The meltdown wasn't private anymore, it was public. That was my cue. I hit send. My email left the outbox, carrying the packet of contracts, checklists, and logs straight to HR, legal, facilities, and the board. Subject line, Administrator of Record, Compliance Failure. At 9:30, the system hit safe mode. The logs went quiet. No more denials, no more attempts. Just silence. Total lockout. And across the street, I watched James's face drain of color. By noon the numbers were already brutal. The demo had been scrapped. Investors left without signing anything. That alone cost $120,000 in penalties written into the contract. On top of that, James authorized an emergency team of outside contractors, 15 grand gone in a single call. I had the logs open on my laptop, every denial neatly stacked, timestamps aligned with the exact moments the investors tried to swipe in. Proof no one could spin away. Inside, the chaos was visible through the glass walls. Sarah argued with Brian from facilities. IT ran cables across the floor like that would change anything. James shouted into his phone so loud I could hear the muffled rage from across the street. At 1 p.m., Michael from HR sent me a message. Ashley, please confirm if you still have admin access. We need your assistance. I screenshotted it. Evidence. No reply. By 3 o'clock, the contractors gave up. They couldn't override a system without the admin of record. The building stayed frozen. Staff stood outside, waiting, gossiping, recording videos. The meltdown was viral now. By 5 o'clock, the day was a write-off. $135,000 gone. Reputations shredded in real time. And still, nobody touched the one step that mattered, my signature. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my seat, and whispered, "Replaceable, right?" By Tuesday morning, the blame game was in full swing. From my spot in the cafe across the street, I could see the executive floor through the glass walls. James stood at the head of the table, red-faced, fists slamming down hard enough to rattle water glasses. Sarah jabbed a finger at Brian from facilities. Brian shrugged and pointed toward IT. IT shook their heads and shoved printouts across the table, logs I already had, logs showing exactly one thing, no admin confirmation. At 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another email from Michael in HR, this one desperate. Ashley, the system still lists you as administrator. Please advise on transfer procedure. We need immediate resolution. I didn't answer. Instead, I dragged it into my receipts folder with the others. Another breadcrumb. Another nail. By 10 o'clock, the story had reached the board. I knew because I saw two directors arrive in black cars, faces tight, not wasting words as they swept past the cameras. Cameras, yes, reporters were here now. Someone had leaked. Maybe staff. Maybe an investor. Didn't matter. The meltdown wasn't internal anymore, it was public. Inside, Sarah tried a new tactic. She blamed me directly. She leaned across the table, voice sharp enough to cut through the glass, saying something that made James nod hard, his jaw clenched. Let them. Every word of blame only proved the system still revolved around me. At 11 o'clock, contractors rolled in again. Different team. More expensive suits. They set up laptops in the lobby, tapped at keys, shook their heads, and walked out 30 minutes later. Another invoice for James. Another failure. The walls of power were crumbling fast, and I wasn't even inside the building. By noon the investors were back, not for a demo this time, but to watch the fallout. Jennifer led them through the lobby like she owned the building. Her heels clicked against the marble, each step louder than James's excuses. I watched from across the street, laptop balanced on my knees. The logs updated in real time. Badge attempts still failing. Rooms still frozen. Nothing had changed since Monday, except now the investors were witnessing the disaster firsthand. Jennifer didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes locked on James, and let silence crush him. Finally, she said one line, clear enough for reporters to hear. If your systems collapse without one employee, how can we trust you with millions of ours? The sentence hit harder than any headline. Staff in the lobby froze. Phones came up. Photos. Videos. Posts. By the time she turned to leave, the meltdown had a hashtag. James followed her, pleading, gesturing wildly, but she didn't even slow down. The investor team climbed back into their black cars and disappeared. No contracts signed. No promises left. At 2 o'clock, Sarah tried calling me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Breathless, forced calm. Ashley, we just need a quick handoff, nothing complicated. We'll make it worth your time. I saved it, added it to receipts. Proof they knew exactly who still held the keys. By 4 o'clock, reporters stood outside the building with cameras. Employees slipped out the side doors to avoid them. The once polished glass tower looked like a crime scene. And all I did was sit quietly, watching, collecting. By Wednesday morning, HR finally broke. At 8:02 a.m., Michael called. His voice shook even though he tried to sound official. Ashley, we urgently need you to initiate the admin transfer. The disruption is impacting critical operations. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, he sent a follow-up email. Longer this time. Words like urgent, escalated, Critical risk. He copied James, Sarah, legal, and even the board. I archived it, screenshotted it, dropped it into receipts. By 9:30, the tone changed. Another email came. Same sender. Ashley, let's resolve this professionally. We can discuss a compensation arrangement if that helps. Translation. They were ready to pay. I sipped my coffee, reading it twice, smiling at the shift. 2 days ago, I was replaceable. Now I was the only word in their inbox that mattered. At 11 o'clock, Michael tried again with a voicemail. We don't want to involve attorneys. Let's find a friendly solution. I saved the file. Another breadcrumb. Another layer of leverage. Inside the building, the chaos was visible even from my cafe seat. Employees still crowded security desks. Temporary paper sign-in sheets piled up. IT dragged in more hardware. Contractors rotated in and out like a parade of failure. Every hour cost them more money. Every call, every email, every voicemail tightened the rope. And I hadn't lifted a finger beyond pressing archive. Thursday morning, I walked into a law office downtown, folder under my arm, USB drive in my pocket. The receptionist barely glanced at me before pointing me toward a glass-walled conference room. Inside sat Amanda, corporate attorney, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She stood, shook my hand, and said, "Show me." I placed the folder on the table, opened it, and slid the contracts across first. She read Clause 14. 4, lips tightening. Notarized transfer only. That's ironclad. Next, I handed her the printouts, logs, emails, tickets, approvals. Each stamped with my name. Each showing I was still the admin of record. Amanda flipped through silently, occasionally nodding, occasionally smirking. Then came the voicemails and desperate HR emails. She listened to one on speaker, Michael's voice begging for a friendly solution. She actually laughed. They're done. They violated their own protocols, they ignored your warnings, and now they're begging. You have all the leverage. I leaned back, arms crossed. So what's it worth? She started calculating. Wrongful termination exposure. Breach of compliance. Investor losses tied directly to the meltdown. Contractor fees wasted. They'll try to lowball, Amanda said. Standard NDA, 2 weeks pay. But with this, we don't negotiate pennies. We negotiate silence. She drafted the first demand on her laptop as I watched. $95,000 severance, $20,000 transfer fee, $40,000 consulting retainer. Neutral reference. Written acknowledgement of system authorship. Clean, enforceable, devastating. I asked, and if they refuse? She smiled, tapping the stack of documents. Then we forward this to the board, the insurer, and the press. You won't need to raise your voice. The paper will do it for you. For the first time all week, I felt the weight shift. No more defense. This was offense. Amanda slid the draft letter across the table. Ready to flip the boardroom? I didn't hesitate. Send it. By Friday morning, the company finally blinked. Amanda forwarded me their reply, a short letter from legal drafted in corporate boilerplate. They were prepared to offer 2-week severance and an NDA in exchange for immediate cooperation in transferring administrative rights. 2 weeks. After years of running their entire infrastructure, after $135,000 lost in a single day, after investors walked out and contractors failed. They thought silence could be bought for pennies. Amanda didn't even look surprised. This is standard. They're testing whether you'll fold. She slid the letter aside and typed up our counter-demand again. $95,000 severance, $20,000 transfer fee, $40,000 consulting retainer, neutral reference, and signed acknowledgement of authorship. This is the real number. Anything less isn't worth your time. I sat back in the chair and thought about James. The smirk in the conference room when he called my work clerical. The way Sarah smiled when I carried my box out of the office. Michael's desperate voicemails. They believed I'd cave because that's what employees always do. Nod, sign, disappear. But this wasn't about bitterness anymore. It was arithmetic. They had already lost more in penalties than my demand letter asked for. Every hour of delay added thousands more in wasted labor and reputational damage. Their cheap offer wasn't just insulting, it was irrational. Amanda called their counsel directly. I listened on speaker. Her tone was calm, surgical. My client has no obligation to transfer administrative rights outside of policy. She has evidence of repeated warnings, contractual language, and direct negligence by your executives. 2 weeks' pay doesn't begin to resolve your exposure. If you want cooperation, You'll meet the outline terms. There was silence on the other end. Then a muttered, "We'll review and revert." The call ended. Amanda leaned back, smiling. They're rattled. Good. By noon, James himself tried. Not through lawyers this time, he called me directly. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was clipped, controlled, but I heard the strain under it. Ashley, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. Let's be reasonable. I kept my tone even. Reasonable would have been listening before your investors walked. He exhaled hard. We can stretch the offer. 1 month's salary. That's generous. I almost laughed. James, you lost 6 figures in a single afternoon. You think my silence costs less than one of your suits? There was a pause, then the cold edge of his real voice. If you push this too far, you'll burn every reference you ever had here. I didn't flinch. Then I'll use yours as kindling. And I hung up. Amanda smirked across the table. Perfect. Now he knows you're not bluffing. By evening, legal sent another letter. The tone had shifted. Less arrogance, more urgency. They didn't accept our full demand, but they didn't repeat their insult either. They asked for a structured discussion with the board. That was the first crack in the wall. I slipped the folder of evidence back into my bag and zipped it shut. For the first time since the firing, I didn't feel like I was on defense. They wanted me at the table now, but I wasn't walking in as an employee. I was walking in as the problem they couldn't solve without paying. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning, a full week after the meltdown started. They wanted it private, contained, handled behind glass doors like everything else in that building. But by then, nothing about this story was private anymore. Employees were leaking videos, investors were whispering to the press, and the board had no choice but to face the truth. Their CEO had lost control. Amanda and I walked into the conference room at 9 o'clock sharp. The air was heavy, the kind of silence that comes when everyone knows reputations are on the line. The directors sat in a row, gray suits, tight mouths, eyes flicking between their notes and James. James looked like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was loose, his forehead shiny with sweat. Sarah sat beside him, stone-faced, pretending composure. Michael wasn't even in the room. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Let's begin. Mr. James, would you like to explain how your company's operations have been paralyzed for a week due to what appears to be a basic compliance oversight? James tried to spin it. This was the result of one disgruntled former employee holding access hostage. We are addressing it. Amanda cut him off smoothly. Correction. This is the result of your company ignoring written warnings, contract clauses, and standard transfer protocols. My client didn't hold anything hostage. She followed policy. You didn't. She slid the black folder across the table. The directors leaned in. Clauses highlighted. Emails printed. Logs timestamped. HR voicemails transcribed. A timeline so clean it might as well have been carved in stone. The chairwoman scanned the first page, then looked up at James. You signed this contract? James shifted in his chair. Yes, but... No buts, she snapped. Clause 14, 4 is explicit. The responsibility is yours. For the next hour, Amanda laid it all out. Wrongful termination, breach of compliance, investor losses, wasted contractor fees, reputational damage. The directors listened in silence, their eyes hardening with every detail. James kept trying to interrupt, but each attempt only made him look smaller. Finally, one director asked the only question that mattered. What will it take to resolve this? Amanda answered without hesitation. $95,000 severance. $20,000 transfer fee. $40,000 consulting retainer. Neutral reference. Signed acknowledgement of authorship. Funds cleared before administrative rights are transferred. The room went quiet. The chairwoman turned to James. Pay it. His face went red, then pale. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Sarah stared at the table. The chairwoman repeated, colder this time, pay it. Before we lose more than money. And, just like that, the power shifted. The decision was made in less than 10 minutes. James fought, but the board didn't back him. The chairwoman repeated the order, settle now. He had no choice. By that afternoon, legal sent over a revised agreement. No vague wording, no games. It listed every demand Amanda had outlined: $95,000 severance, $20,000 transfer fee, $40,000 consulting retainer, neutral reference, and written acknowledgement of system authorship. Payment within 48 hours. Transfer only after funds cleared. Amanda reviewed it, line by line, then handed it to me. This is clean. They're cornered. I signed. Calm, steady, no hesitation. The next day, the money hit my account. 6 figures sitting there, undeniable proof that the same people who called me replaceable now had to pay to buy back control of their own building. At noon, I walked into the office one last time, escorted to the conference room. The board wanted the transfer recorded. Amanda sat beside me. James was across the table, pale, silent, fists clenched. I opened my laptop, entered the credentials, and walked them through the checklist. ID verification, indemnity release, notarized confirmation. Step by step, exactly as the policy required. Every click projected on the big screen. At the end, I hovered over the final confirmation button. For a second, the room was silent. I looked straight at James. His jaw tightened, his eyes burning. Then I clicked. Transfer complete. The system handed them back their keys. Not because of panic, not because of threats, but because they finally paid for what they tried to dismiss. Amanda closed the laptop and slid it into her bag. We're done here, she said. I stood, adjusted my coat, and walked out without another word. They had their access back. I had my leverage turned into cash, proof, and freedom. The flip was complete. I left the building without looking back. The sun was bright, the city alive, and for the first time in weeks I felt light. My laptop was closed, the deal was signed, and the money sat safe in my account. That night, I sat in a quiet cafe, sipping coffee that actually tasted good. The black folder lay on the table in front of me, thinner now, almost empty. The fight was over. I thought about James, about Sarah, about Michael, about the smirk, the whispers, the humiliation. They believed titles made them untouchable. They believed power lived at the top floor. But power had been hiding in plain sight the whole time, in the details, the contracts, the systems no one respected enough to read. That was the lesson. You don't need to be loud to be dangerous. You just need to know where the pressure points are and wait for someone arrogant enough to ignore them. I closed the folder, finished my coffee, and smiled. Then I asked myself the question I'll ask you now. If the people who call you replaceable suddenly had to live without you, what would collapse first? Because every story lives as long as it is remembered. A like is your mark on the story, and a subscription is your ticket to the next one.